Obviously, it's big ducks with the worst builds the league start with. Do you guys remember Ultimatum League, BFBB? That was such a bait build. It was terrible. You should never trust this guy again. Boys, you remember the story or the joke that you've maybe heard about how, the upstanding citizen, the guy who did his best to try to make things work out, helped out his community and all of that, but then, there's that one blemish, that one goat came around and kind of messed up his whole reputation? How I feel sometimes. But all jokes aside, there are some things that I think that you should try to avoid when it comes to league starters in the upcoming league, and I know this is going to sound obvious to some of you, but I know there are probably a lot of new players who are going to get omega baited into playing some things simply just because they get buffed. Now what am I talking about? I'm talking about self-casting and I'm talking about bow builds. Historically, anytime that they've tried to buff self-casting, channeling abilities, bow builds, it's always been bait. I haven't seen a single time, probably ever, where a self-casting or a channeling or a bow buff has made anything realistic ever happen. The way that I feel about it is that bow builds are just really, really hard to scale, and if you look in the patch notes, there's a lot of damage that's being added to the base of bows and such like that, but there's a lot of damage that's also being taken out of the base characters, talking about like skill gems and things like that. And when it comes to self-casting, the thing that I always tell people, was self-casting good in 3.14 before the big giant nerf of everything? Because if the ability that you're thinking about league starting wasn't good in 3.14, randomly giving it a bunch of numerical buffs isn't going to change anything. Like, I don't care how high you pump the numbers of ability like lightning tendrils, it's just not going to feel good on league start. Sure, if you have like insane mirror tier gear and you pump a bunch of cast speed and stuff into it, yeah, it'll probably feel fine, but for a league start, you're kind of doing yourself a little bit of a disservice. And this goes for pretty much any other ability that is a self-cast ability, a channeling ability. If it was good in 3.15, if it was good in 3.16, it's probably going to be okay in 3.17, but I would let other people make the mistake for you, especially if you are a new player, before you decide to choose, oh, this ability got like a 50 or 60% buff, better play it, right? Like, there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to get baited into playing like BFBB now after Blade Blast got completely annihilated a couple patches ago and the AoE is basically non-existent. It's gonna happen, and I just want to make sure that you are not one of those people. Now, the next archetype of builds that I want to talk about is bows, as I said before. Now, there are going to be a few archetypes that will probably be okay. Things like Bleed Bow will probably be alright, because that was just missing a little bit of damage, but all the rest of the pieces of the kit were there. But when it comes to things like Lightning Arrow, or it comes to things like Ice Shot, when it comes to things like Burning Arrow, you really do have to be a little careful with these abilities, because sometimes you can open up a POB, the numbers look really good, and you think, oh yeah, this is going to be great. You get into game and you realize, I need like 6 mirrors worth of gear to even get a third of the damage that it shows in this POB. And then you're not having a good time. Bow builds can feel okay very early on, but you'll notice right away that the damage is going to fall off and you're not going to be having too nice of a time on league start. I always suggest that you play a bow build as your second character or transition into it. Something that you can do if you're like dead set on playing like a ranger bow build. Start with Toxic Rain as like a raider or pathfinder, get a little bit of currency and transition into it. Or play anything else as a raider, pathfinder, or Deadeye. Just anything that's not like a typical bow build, because you are going to be probably pretty disappointed. There's just problems with some of these archetypes in PoE. I feel this way about melee, I feel this way about self-casting and channeling, I feel this way about bow builds. Bow builds at least can scale pretty high up into the endgame and have their purpose in PoE. But things like melee, things like self-cast and channeling, they have mechanical problems. And you can't just throw numbers at a mechanical problem and expect it to be fixed. Channeling, self-casting, it needs some kind of actual change, like maybe the ability to move while you're casting these abilities, or maybe strike skills need something similar, where if you're like holding the strike skill and you move across, it like auto targets things that are nearby, or maybe give strike skills like a small leap, kind of like a flicker strike, but just like a small one, so that they can at least get to enemies and hit with the strikes consistently. Numerical changes are not going to really fix any of these kinds of builds. So make sure that you don't get baited, make sure that you don't choose just some random skill just because it got buffed and hoping that it's going to be a great league start. Because I can pretty much guarantee if the ability wasn't good in 3.14, it wasn't good in 3.15, and it wasn't good in 3.16, almost assuredly, it's not going to be good in 3.17. So remember, boys, if you're enjoying the content or these videos help you out, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification bell for updates on all the latest content, and stay safe out there in Ray class, and I hope you guys have a good league start in 3.17 Siege of the Atlas.